while John's doing all of that high-tech stuff, also as your final year tutor, you're very welcome to contact me with any course-related issues, anything to do with modules you're taking, any kind of questions that wouldn't otherwise be directed to module leaders or the administrative staff. So do feel free to get in touch. And I usually have my door open if I'm in. Okay, so you can pop your head around the course as well. All right. Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. And I think that's really important to note that Ant, being your final year tutor, me for your dissertation, but Ant for anything in relation to your schemes of studying this year, we're the go-to people, okay? Our job is here to support you, to answer your questions, to help out. It's not a question that you should go, talk to the person next to you and fret a bit more. Our purpose on the planet for the next 9 months is me to support you through your dissertation and Ant to help you with your final year studies, okay? So exploit us ruthlessly. Don't keep it all in, share it, because as I say, our job is to have your backs and help and support you. So it's really important that you use Ant in his final year tutor role, use your year meetings, etc. Or just go and knock on his door, send him an email and ask any questions that you have. Cool, right. It's hot in here, isn't it? I'm just standing at the back there. I'm going to try and open that door and see if I can get a breeze through, because if I'm with my full strength coffee at 9:15, just struggling a little bit. Where are you guys going to be now? We tried. Okay, so welcome to this first session on the research dissertation module. This is a module that's here to support you through your research dissertation. Research dissertation is a thing that I guess is quite significant. I guess you're feeling that, hence that very cool turnout today. Your final year, to remind you, is worth 70% of your dissertation, 70% of your overall degree classification, and your dissertation is 20 credits in a 70%. No. 30 credits in a 70% year. All these numbers. Remember how you... This is the worst bit, okay? Remember how you fretted about that 2,000 word essay in a 20 credit module in your second year. And now you're in a 70% year with one piece of work. That blows that out of the water. So, the point is we need to get this right. That's the purpose of this string of lectures. We're going to run through the autumn semester and support you to that end. This is your safety net. This is your go-to place, your safe place that you can come to and ask stupid questions, raise anything you want to talk about, any issues you've got with your studies, your creation of your primary fieldwork, your secondary evidence, doing your analysis. This is the thing, I'm the person you can come to help you through that situation, above and beyond your own supervisor. Okay? So that's the purpose of these slots. Hopefully we can create over the course of the coming weeks a space in which you can come into and feel free and open enough to ask any questions that you have. Anything that you think is silly and daft, it probably isn't. Since I've been in the school, which is about 15 years now, we've done a lot of dissertations. Crazy questions come up, but they're all relevant to your subject, your topic. So we can use this space as a space to discuss them together, because I'm betting you, if you've got that question, someone else in the room has got that question too. So you're kind of acting in solidarity with your colleagues who perhaps don't want to ask the question. You can ask it. We can ask it formally by waving your hand at any point during today's slot and the subsequent weeks, or indeed just drop me an email and I can bring them up and discuss them at subsequent weeks. Okay? So, andersonj@cardiff.ac.uk. Any questions that you've got, you can ask me, and then if you're happy for me to give a personal answer, I can do that, but I can also give an answer to the group in the subsequent week, because that might help someone else. Okay? So I'm going to lead in these sessions. I'm going to bring up themes and problems and issues that have come up through my experience of supervising dissertations for 15 years. But it can also be led by your bespoke things that have just come up this year too. Okay? So I'll lead, and then you can kind of pipe up, or we'll have particular moments where you can discuss issues throughout the course of this session. It's not supposed to be instead of, your supervision, and as I'll go on to say, it's really important to create a productive and creative relationship with your supervisor, if you've not done so already. But I can be here to mop up any problems, or indeed engage with your supervisor to help, to give them a nudge to make sure that they are giving you the help that you think you want. Okay? So I can be the intermediary between you and your supervisor if you feel a little polite nudge is required in terms of them responding to your emails or whatever it happens to be. Similarly, it's not just these sessions that can act as a support, as well as your supervisor. There's a dissertation handbook that has lots of FAQs in them and lots of the specifics about how you paginate, how you present, etc. your dissertation, which might be more relevant to you as we get towards the end of the semester. And that is available through Learning Central on the Research Dissertation CPO 313 icon under the Learning Materials. And as I've said, you can bring questions to class. So what we're going to do in these... Oh, shocking. I missed the best bit. We're all about time. These aren't going to happen every week, but to fuel your engagement, you can tell me what you want in the weeks when we're not going to do it. Okay, so this is how I plan to use the time, but we can collaborate on how we actually do it in practice. So today I'm going to give you a big overview on the purpose of a dissertation, what it looks like, what it feels like. Just try to get you over the sense of, oh my God, this is new, this is big, this is significant. But trust me, you can all do this. Even though you haven't done it before, it's going to be fun. And hopefully every week we'll have a Q&A as well. But that kind of comes from you, okay? If you don't kind of want it, we won't do it. But if you've got questions, let's use this space as you want this space used. Next week we'll have a similar slot. And next week I want to introduce you specifically to the literature review and the methodology. Because these are perhaps the first things that you might think about writing, or at least reflecting on where you're at and collating materials for. So doing this front and centre in week 2 I think will be a useful thing to do. For weeks 3 and 4 I wasn't anticipating having a session. I think in those sessions you'd be using your supervisor more broadly. But what I might suggest is that I am available in those sessions, perhaps not in this room, perhaps in my office, or if there are numerous people who want to come and have a chat, I'll book like 165 or something, a seminar room. So we can come and have kind of mini surgeries about dissertation, just have an open house for people to come and talk about things. So if you'd like to mull over that idea, and we'll return to it later in the session to see what it is you might actually like. So in weeks 3 and 4, I can make myself available for the Q&A bit, if you like, above and beyond your actual supervisions with your supervisor. And then in the week before reading week, we'll talk about how one might not simply analyse your empirical material, but also begin writing your empirical material. Because by that stage, that's broadly where you should be in the scheme of things. Clear enough so far? After reading week, you're on the home straight. You can see the finish line in sight. So week 7, I think it's probably a good point. You might go away for reading week, you might go home or whatever. That's the point at which you should catch up with your supervisor again. And then week 8 will have a broader open surgery on the problems that we're facing right now. And then in week 9, we'll think about bringing it all together. How do you synthesize and make a coherent dissertation from beginning to end? Because that's the point at which you've got all your jigsaw pieces, but you've got to actually make it into a coherent picture to make it look, feel, and indeed become a dissertation. A key point to note on this slide is how you want to use your supervisor. And I'll actually say how you want to manage your supervisor, because effectively your supervisor is there to give you the support that you need, which may be different for each of you. Some of you might want lots of comments on drafts in a particular way. Some people might, I don't want someone reading my drafts, I want someone to just make sure my questions are correct, etc., etc. Someone might want just stuff by email, somebody might want 45-minute slot or an hour slot. Well, actually 20 minutes is fine. Can we have 20 minutes a week rather than an hour every 2 weeks? Whatever. You have to manage your supervisor. You need to make it really clear to them what will benefit you the most. Don't just necessarily accept from them what they have on offer. This isn't a, I was going to say a negotiation, but it's a conversation, okay? It's a conversation between two grown adults, one who has a responsibility to help and the other has a responsibility to make it clear what help they need. Okay? So we need to think about that supervisory relationship, and I'll comment on that a bit more in a couple of slides. But on here, that is the date to note. Effectively, when teaching finishes in the autumn semester, that's the last date at which you can use your supervisor. Okay? That's not the date you hand in your dissertation. Get to that in a minute. But effectively, you can use your supervisor up until the semester finishes. You can give them stuff, and they might comment on it over the subsequent weekend or days and get it back to you. Okay? But you can't send them new materials. So effectively, after Friday the 13th, you're kind of on your own. All right? So you need to be thinking, where do I need to be by that stage? So when I'm finishing everything off, tidying it up, what do I want to be so I don't need that sense checking with my supervisor? I need to get all the ideas, information, hints, tips, etc. from them so I can hear them in my mind's eye when I'm thinking, okay, well, what does this page look like or whatever? Thinking, oh, that's what John would be saying. So I don't actually need to use John, my supervisor, because you've got the information by then. You can be your own editor. You can be your own supervisor by that stage. And you'll be fine. We'll get you there, and that, if you do your part of it, we'll do our part of it, and we'll all get there by that date. And then you've got over your Christmas lunch, just to finish it off, before you submit on January the 8th. Okay? And then, of course, human geographies and practice will kick in, and you'll make it, see how you can apply it. With that in mind, actually, I was thinking when Ant was talking about, hopefully that would be quite an exciting challenge for the human geographers in the room, to think, how can I use my dissertation to make some sort of substantial change in the world, or at least imagine how that might happen in a hypothetical situation. I'm guessing some of you might be thinking, well, my dissertation doesn't really lend itself to policy, or lend itself, imagine some people's dissertations going, yeah, that fits really well. But actually, you think about the people either you are planning to interview or you've already interviewed. These are stakeholders in your research, right? These are people to whom the issue matters as much as it does to you. Those are the sorts of audiences you could be writing something for, some sort of research report or policy recommendation, or all that sort of stuff. I was thinking up there of one of my supervisees' work, which is about community dance. And you're thinking, okay, community dance, how does that fit in with public policy or something? But that might fit in with healthy lifestyles. It might fit in issues of inclusion. How can one particular organisation go out and get more people from a community in order to promote active lifestyles or create community cohesion, all those sorts of things. You can think of any subject. Think about your stakeholders, who you've been talking to somehow. How could you use your research to connect back to them? That would be fine with human geographies and practice. So it doesn't have to be a daunting, oh my God, I need to be Greta Thunberg to be good enough with my dissertation. Small and apparently mundane is actually incredibly extraordinary and significant, and you need to be thinking about things in those terms. Cool. Okay. Dissertation. Dissertation is new to you. You've never done one before. As I might also mention next week, a lot of things often come back saying, oh, I have to write my literature review. I've never done a literature review before. I'm thinking, you have. You've done all the components of the dissertation before, including, for example, a literature review. And you need to think of it like that in order to demystify it, to make it less scary, to make it actually a really doable, straightforward piece of work when you break it up into bite-sized chunks. If we just focus, for example, on the literature review since I brought it up, a literature review is about-ish a 2,000-word essay. Crikey, how many 2,000-word essays have you written already? They've all been about a particular title. Well, you've got a title for your dissertation. You're writing a 2,000-word essay in your literature review about the literatures that are relevant to your title. Well, you've done that in every module you've taken as an undergraduate. This is not something to be petrified or be mysterious about or somehow stand you in the headlights. Oh my God, lights. You've done this stuff before. In fact, all your undergraduate career to date has been building to this moment. You have all the skills from your making knowledge, from your developing research methods, to write a chapter on methodology. The only new thing is that, well, actually, you've gone out and created primary research yourself, both in making knowledge and developing research methods. The only issue here is that it's a bigger body of work. It's not a 2,000 word essay or it's a 4,000 word essay. It just happens to be 10,000 words. If you consider this as just a breakdown in sections, as we're going to go through on this slide, it hopefully will become slightly less scary and slightly more doable. So, I would suggest that you've probably got about 7 chapters in your dissertation. But an important point to note is that everyone's dissertation will be slightly different. So this is kind of like an example dissertation rather than the thing that you must do. Feel confident to improvise around the edges, to bespoke it to you, and indeed I think that is the strategy to success. But in general, you will have an introduction, you will have a literature review, you will have a methodology chapter, you will have a number of empirical chapters that directly engage with the aims and objectives or the research questions of your thesis. And it might be logical to suggest that if you have 3 key research questions, you have 3 chapters that engage directly each with one of those questions. So if you were going to have 3 research questions, you've had 3 empirical chapters, and you would have a conclusion. So together you'd have about 7 chapters. If this was a 14,000 word piece of work, which in my remedial maths, as we've already seen, I'm not that great at it, my remedial maths would say, okay, that's 7 chapters, 2,000 words, 14,000 words, that would make sense to me. But the powers that be make it difficult to say it's not 14,000 words, it's 10,000 words. So there we have to do a little bit of maths to work out, okay, well, each chapter's not going to be necessarily the same size, but they've all got to come in at around 10,000 words. So what might that look like? Instead of 7 2,000 word essays, which you're completely confident doing, maybe it becomes slightly easier. Maybe you might have an introduction of about 1,000 words-ish, somewhere between 800 and 1,200, depending on your topic, depending on how you want to structure your materials. Then you might have a literature review, which might be slightly bigger, because there's often quite a lot of conceptual ideas or policy material or grey material that is relevant to your dissertation, and you want enough space to talk about it. So maybe that's going to be slightly more. Maybe 3,000 words for some of you, but around that ballpark. Then you're going to have a methodology chapter discussing how you put into operation your thesis, what your questions were and how you put them into practice. And I'll talk a little bit more about what goes into each of these chapters later on. Then your empirical analysis chapters, if you had 3, and if they were about 1,300 words, then that might kind of work. And then you've got a conclusion, which kind of bookends the introduction. If your introduction is, this is the problem, this is what I'm going to go and look at, and this is how I did it, then the conclusion is almost in the other tense. Well, this is what I did. This is why it was significant. This is what I found. And linking for those human geographers amongst you what potential impact it might have, suggesting some questions that you might go on to look at with Anthony in human geographies and practice. If adding up on my fingers was correct, this comes in at about 10,000 words. So here we've got a kind of example dissertation where each of you can kind of go, okay, if I start from this premise, how do I want to improvise around this and make this my own? With that idea that 10,000 words is your goal, that's your limit, and look upon it as the same sort of limit as you would do any other essay that you kind of don't want to go over. Any questions? In the same way that with any other assessment that you do, your bibliography doesn't count. If you use figures or charts, that doesn't count for the word count. Okay, if you use any appendices or any footnotes, they don't count for your word count. So you think, okay, this is the body of work has to equate to just under 10,000 words. But I have a little bit of wriggle room with all those other garnish things that I can put on it. So if I'm a little bit over, that's what I should be using. I should be using appendices, I should be using figures, charts, footnotes, etc. to use my word count smartly. Okay? So, if that's our job of work, to create a draft of a dissertation by the end of supervision, and then you're just tidying up the bells and whistles over Christmas before submission. We need to map this onto a timeline, okay, to make it practical and doable. That would be a very useful thing to do. And this is empty, currently, timeline, but this is how you should be thinking about your work. This is what I would be doing if you were my supervisees. Think, okay, we have this many weeks, about 10 weeks, to do about 7 chapters. When you break it down like that, it's kind of, if you sneeze and lose a week, you're kind of down to a chapter a week. So we've kind of got to have good time management. We've kind of got to be on it. We have to think about all the other commitments that you have in your life between now and Christmas, in terms of the other modules that you're doing. Some people will be doing just one other module, some people will be doing 2 other modules. If you're just doing 50 credits this semester, either dissertation or something else, you're looking at your weekly timetable and going, oh, 9 o'clock on Fridays up. But apart from that, my time's my own. But you'll be going, yes, your time's your own. Your time is your own. Nail these 30 credits. You kind of got to, I know none of you would be thinking this way anyway, but get out of that kind of year 1 student mentality that Yama can have tomorrow. This is the time. If you use this 10 weeks wisely, you will nail this. If you leave it till week 6, you probably won't. You'll be trying to dodge bullets all the time. Use your time really cleverly. So think, what are the other credits that I'm doing? How are they fitting into this? When are my other coursework deadlines coming? When have I got to work in Costa? What have I got in terms of my athletics or my social stuff, or my family stuff, or my boyfriend or my girlfriend? What's happening in this time? Boringly draw out a timetable for yourself and think, okay, which days of the week am I prioritizing my dissertation? How many hours should I be doing? And we'll move on to that in a little bit of time. And think, okay, where am I at now? And again, we'll move on to this in a second. And think, okay, when am I going to do my empirical analysis? When am I going to write my methodology chapter? When am I going to be seeing my supervisor? When my lit review is going to be done? How am I going to populate this timeline in order that I've got everything that I want from my supervisor by mid-December, and I'm in a position then to steer the ship home over Christmas and submit on time. This might be a version of that. In the same way that I'm saying that there were this many chapters of this approximate length was just an example. Again, this is just an example, but hopefully it might be useful to set some bells changing in your head. So, week 1. It's Friday of week 1 already. If you've not done already, contact your supervisor. Introduce yourself to your supervisor. Confirm who your supervisor is. If there's a grey area over that, and I'm guessing there might be at least one person in the room for that is the case, so please talk to me afterwards and we'll nail that for you. But recontact your supervisor. Make sure you've got a meeting imminently if you've not met them already. Because you need to confirm with them, but also confirm to yourself where you're at in terms of your own particular timeline. Are you clear about the title or the broad area of your dissertation? Are you clear about your research questions? Where are you at in terms of your fieldwork collection? Have you done it? Are you halfway through it? Have you got plans to finish it, but you've encountered a few obstacles over the summer that's meant it's all slowed down? It doesn't matter where you are. Don't get the fear now. If you feel you're there or there on the curve, what matters is you engage with the reality that you're in. Because there is enough time to sort it all out, but only if you confront it right now. Okay? And your supervisor should be a really useful person who you can use to that end. But also, that's not the only person you can use. You can use me as the leader of this module. You can use your personal tutor. They're there for precisely these sorts of talks. And indeed, you might be thinking, okay, well, my research kind of straddles, I don't know, it might be about, regeneration for the sake of argument. And thinking, well, actually, that's a little bit of economic and a little bit of environmental. And I've got an economic member of staff for my dissertation supervisor. Does that mean I can't go and talk to person X on the environmental side? No, it completely doesn't. They're not your supervisor, but you're a member of this school. We're all part of the same group. You can go and email them and say, can I have half an hour of your time to discuss an issue of my dissertation? Because I think your work on ... or that lecture you gave on ... might be really interesting to me. You can do that, okay? And if there's any problems with that, you come to me and I'll iron those wrinkles out for you, okay? So you can think about your supervisor, you can think about me, your personal tutor, but indeed any member of staff. If you just want a little quick chat with them, that's kind of what we're here for. So confirm your state of play and your initial plan. Work out, where am I at? What do I need to do? And over the course of perhaps the next fortnight, get those things in play so you can be in a situation by, let's say, week 4, week 5, where you feel, okay, I'm ready to do the sorts of things that John is suggesting here. If, for example, you've started your empirical work, maybe you're halfway through it, maybe even you've just completed it, you need, if you, at the early end of that situation, you've got to think, okay, I've got to get this stuff done in the next couple of weeks. I've got to collect my material. I can't really be still collecting material in week 5 or week 6, because then you're really concertinaing, good word, John, your writing process in the second half of the semester. And why do you want to put that much pressure on yourself? Okay? It may well be that you can only collect your data, let's say, in reading week, but in that case, you need to bring some of the things here, to make it work for you. Okay? You need to design and take control of your own writing process. Let's say that you've got some of your empirical material right now. Become literate in that material. What did your interviewees tell you? What did your survey say? What sort of key ideas are coming out of the data? Once you begin doing that, you can then think, okay, these are the things that I expected. This is good. This is reassuring. Or actually, I've got a lot of the things that I expected, but a lot of things that I didn't expect too. So you need to then reflect back on perhaps the research proposal that you put together for developing research methods too, with your research questions in it, perhaps your ethical form, because that might be a source in which you kind of banked all your ideas about your dissertation and go, do these ideas still hold true? How do I need to amend them or change them? It might just be a quick tailoring of the research question to add in another theme. It might be thinking, okay, well, point X came up and I've got no literature on point X. This is something that I didn't even think about. So I know in the next couple of weeks I've got to get onto Scopus, I've got to go onto Google Scholar, I've got to find some papers about this. So that can fill in the gap in the terrain in which this dissertation is working. I know that area's got to be in my literature somewhere. So I'll get the materials for that. So you can actually get yourself from a standing start going quite easily. It might be, I just sit in front of my computer and do a Google search. Find some data, find some materials. That's got me going. Right, tomorrow I'm going to read that stuff. I'm going to get those themes out. I'm going to put that in a folder on my computer or a literal actual folder. I am moving this forward. I am psychologically G'ing myself up. I'm cheerleading myself into getting this stuff going. Okay, so confirm your state of play and your initial plan. So you can begin perhaps reflecting on your objective next week, finalising how I'm going to get that outstanding empirical material. So I know that over the next couple of weeks, this is going to happen. I'm getting this ball rolling. We could then perhaps think, okay, how am I actually going to formally change my research objectives or my search questions based on the data, what the data is telling me? And that's completely fine. It's part of the process. It's what we all do. You're not pinned yourself to the things that you said back in May or June. You can improvise and you can change and you can innovate. That is part of the process. Identifies these gaps and fills them. So by the time we're getting back to the end of week 3, we might be thinking, okay, if I've not got all my material, empirical material, I know I can. It's happening. Don't panic. I know indicatively how this might be reflecting back in terms of key ideas that this thesis is working on, and I'm beginning to generate those materials. I've got the PDFs on my computer, I've printed the things out, I've begun looking through them. I can kind of feel that my literature review might have kind of 3 or 4 sections to it. Don't know the details yet, but I'm kind of getting there. You're beginning to feel what the dissertation might kind of look like. And so by we come to sort of halfway through the semester, weeks 4 and week 5, you can use the materials that I'll deliver next week about how you write the literature review and how you write the methodology chapter and what should really be in them. And you can think, okay, well, I've got that stuff and I can spend, you can start sooner, but actually by this sort of stage, you think, I'm getting words on paper, this thing's moving, every day I'm putting X many hundred words in it, and I've got a little bar chart even, because I'm OCD on my whiteboard at home, thinking, I've got 10,000 words and I'm going up. I remember when I was doing my PhD, someone did have that in their office, that just flung into my head just then, and they were doing little histogram bar charts. I've got to get to 70,000 words, and this week I've done 35. Not a good week. But you know, kind of use whatever conceit to get you going, to get some momentum and feel positive about this. Any questions so far? Yeah, go.
So we won't be sort of penalised if our research questions and our ethical approval aren't the same as our research questions.
That's a really good question. You won't be penalised.
Because what I mean is sometimes obviously we need to submit our ethical approval, but if we're kind of doing everything as it goes, then our research questions might change later on.
So
Will that be a problem?
there are two ways I can answer that. If you're doing something about regeneration for the sake of argument, since we've talked about it, and you emphasising the economic, but then you move to more emphasise the environmental, right? Your methodology is effectively the same, but there's a nuance of change in the questions. That's completely fine and wholly expected. Okay, that will encounter no problem at all. The problem, the second way to answer that question, is that it relates to the significance of the change. So if you said I was doing about regeneration and then you decided actually halfway through the summer I'm going to do child prostitution in Thailand, right? Then none of your ethics would be considering the key issues that your dissertation is now moving to. You've got to have some sort of broad constructive alignment between your ethical approval form and the types of methods and the type of broad research objectives that you're doing. And if they're in broad parameters in the same sort of area, then that's kind of fine. It's when you're going from subject A to subject 223, so it's not even in the same metaphor. You just get different metric numbers to letters, do you know what I mean? And it's that problem that you really should be redoing the ethical approval form, which, if I'm honest, is a bit of a headache, because you've got to fill that in and get that okay before you start, and so there's time delays involved in that. So if you're thinking about doing that now, I guess it needs to be done, but it needs to be done really quick. But if they're minor variations, I don't know, 10 or 20%, if you're thinking actually, I thought I was going there, but then generally it's fine, because that's what happens with research. You've really got to kind of critically reflect on these issues. So it's a really great question, because you're kind of going, how straight down the line do I need to be? Do I need to be robotic? Because I said I was doing that, and thinking, research is not done by cyborgs and robots. It's done by you and me. We're human. We change our minds. We get inspiration. We have blind spots, and suddenly we stumble upon something that means, God, this is fascinating. Why didn't I think about it before? I need this in my dissertation. And you're allowed to do that. It's sometimes the happy coincidences that you find through your dissertation are the most rewarding things you can find. Your ethical approval form is not there to limit you. It's there to ensure that you are critically reflecting on the most appropriate methods in relation to the questions that you thought you were asking. If you then discover something else through the process, then that's just the way it is. But if halfway through before you even start, you think, actually, I changed my mind, I'm going to do something completely different, then it's that when you need to think, okay, how far away from reality was what I said I was doing? Because the last thing I want to do is mislead somebody. Okay? And that's just about being open and courteous and nice, really. And that we should be thinking about it like that. Okay? We all right? Okay, so we're up to reading week-ish. So this is setting up, make sure we're good to go, tidying up loose ends, getting ourselves up to speed, gathering momentum, getting all that stuff, and effectively this half of it is the writing heavy bit. Okay? That's not to say you can't start writing, and some people say, I'm good to go now, can't I write? Of course you can start if you want to. You tailor this program to your needs. But you need to be thinking, I need to be getting some writing done by this, because if you've got, let's say, 5 weeks and about 10,000 words, it's really clear how many words you need to be producing in a given week. And you know how you are with writing. You have so much experience of it now. You know how you might think, you might write to think, and you need multiple drafts in order to get your ideas in a cogent enough way to be able to share with somebody. So how many drafts do you want to do before you share it with your supervisor? How long will that take? If you want, and I would recommend this, that every chapter that you do is seen by your supervisor before it's given in, part of your submission, then how are you going to use that time? You need to, for example, think about your own commitments and when you're going to get this written, but also your supervisor's availability. How much are they teaching you on the semester, for example? Are they not teaching at all, but actually got a research conference in the other side of the world during week 8, just when you need them? You need to plan around these particular eventualities and work that into your timetable. Okay? Since I've talking about getting your supervisor's feedback, so to summarise, what I recommended just then was that every chapter should be seen by your supervisor to have some sort of comment on it. When you do that, let them know what sort of comments that you want. If you think, do you know what, ignore the grammar and the typos, I'm going to sort that out myself. This is a draft. So what I want is the structuring okay? Is the way I'm critically discussing point X or point Y. Is that what you want? Or actually, you want it the other way around? Let them know what you want. Don't get what they're just giving you. Get what you need in order to what you think that add value to that draft, so when it's submitted, it's good. Although I said that I think every chapter, in an ideal world, every chapter should be seen by your supervisor, on many, many occasions, I've not seen every chapter that my supervisee has handed in as part of that overall dissertation, particularly in relation to the introduction and the conclusion. And this comes back to a point that I raised earlier on. By the time you get to mid-December, you'll be so across all this stuff, you will know what your supervisor will be saying about a particular bit of work. So sometimes I felt really confident in my supervisee handing in their dissertation without me seeing the introduction and conclusion. Because if I've told them, and indeed through this methods module, what a dissertation should look and feel like, and they've read a few introductions and conclusions because they're available through Learning Central that you can look at, and think, actually, you don't need me anymore. I've made myself obsolete. Okay? So by that stage, there is the situation where, you know what, my empirical analysis is the thing that I really want to comment on. But I could probably do my introduction and conclusion myself. I would say with that caveat, get your supervisor to comment. Okay? So we have a situation where we're getting ourselves up to speed, making sure we're creating the material, getting our plan in mind, getting ourselves momentum, and hopefully this is then a matter of drafting and compiling the key chapters. And as I said, next week we'll particularly talk about the literature review and the methodology chapter and what they might look and feel like. Okay. Any questions? You all right so far? So, I've touched upon numerous times already this morning about your supervisor and their role in it. That there are many people you can ask for support, but it is your supervisor who has the dominant role here and has workload time given to them to support you. So I've got a problem if they're not giving you the support they need. So come to me and I'll make it happen. Okay, if this means changing supervisor or hauling them over coals or putting them in a rack and we'll all throw cabbages at them, that's what we're going to do. Because from my perspective, their role is to support you guys. Okay, but to a certain extent. You guys have your supervisors for 8 hours, okay? And this is an important thing to note, that some people might be able, just through force and luck, to generate really positive relationships with their supervisor, but perhaps a handful of you might not be so lucky. But nevertheless, you should get your 8 hours. We can't have a situation where somebody is getting 20 hours supervision and the other person is getting 5 hours supervision. The point of giving 8 hours supervision is a nod towards the ballpark figure that everybody should be getting for equity purposes. So everybody gets the same quantity of support. We shouldn't be getting to the stage that at the end of November, someone's saying, oh, I've heard that Billy Bob has got like, he's had 2 hours a week, and he had 2 hours a week since July. And I've only seen my supervisor for once, and they were kind of thinking about the football when I was talking to them anyway. It wasn't fair. The situation's been set up within the school that everybody's supposed to have the same amount of time. So you can't kind of ask for too much. You need to be thinking, if this 8 hours is through face-to-face contact, is then reading my stuff and feeding back to me, how do I want to use this? Okay? Some of you might have used some hours already, so you're thinking, okay, ideally, or one variety of this might be an hour a week for the next 8 weeks, right? Thinking, actually, I don't need that. I've had a couple of hours already. What I want is a catch-up meeting, and then a meeting in week 3 or week 4, after I've given them something, or I've sent them something, or whatever, thinking, okay, how am I going to plan this? How am I going to manage my supervisor, manage upwards, to get them to give me the thing that I need? How much chatting about structure do I need? Chatting about a plan? How much direct feedback on something that you've written do you need? How much do you need sense checking about your methodological approach for that outstanding bit of empirical work that you need? How do you want to use that time in the faithful knowledge that everybody else will be tailoring their own needs with their own supervisor with that same amount of time? So broadly put, when mid-December comes around, you've all had the same amount of time, but you've had it in a way that suits you. All right? So, the second point is worth drawing attention to as well. You might think, do you know what, I can just cruise this. Or actually, I'm a little bit nervous seeing my supervisor. That's scary. So I'm not going to raise it, even though just... No, don't do it. Don't do it. It's all right, because then I can have a day of their time in December. Because that'll be fine. Now, if your supervisor's supervising 6 other people, and they all have that plan, there simply won't be enough days in December, amongst all the other stuff that staff have to do with it. So stockpiling time is not a great plan. Little and often is much better than a chunk at the end. So I would say, for example, if you're thinking you wanted feedback, feed forward about a draft, then don't stockpile your drafts and give them all at once. Drip feed them to them, even in sections if necessary. Okay, here's my literature review, or here's a section of my literature review. Here's my literature review, my methodology chapter, and 2 empirical chapters. If I get out, crikey, that's my afternoon gone. You know, and to be honest with you, that's fine if I had a free afternoon, but we kind of don't. Just like, you know, on busy semesters for you guys, thinking a free afternoon's like hen's teeth, but you have an hour here or 45 minutes there. And so you can, stockpiling time is just not a great thing to do, because it just means everybody needs at the end. Drip feeding is a far better way to manage your time, and actually a far more constructive way. And just last point, if there's problems, let me know. If there's problems, what are you going to do? You could exactly, if there's problems, right, what are we going to do? Exactly, right? Because seriously, in my role as Director of Teaching and Learning last year, I dealt with maybe 3 or 4 cases of people who said, I've had problems with my supervision. So in a cohort of 120, in one sense that's not bad. It's 3 or 4 too many, granted, but it's not bad. But they told Chris, who was then Director of Undergraduate Studies, Chris is now the Director of Teaching and Learning, but I was Director of Teaching and Learning. Yeah. And I'm going, why didn't you say it's so difficult to help you after the event? It is so difficult to help after you've submitted. It's so much easier to get you the help you need when you need it than trying to rectify a situation when it's gotten too far and you've submitted your work. Okay? The key thing to do is good communication. Can't even say it. The key thing to do is email your supervisor about when you want a meeting. If the meeting is missed, you document it and you let me know. I can intervene and change that situation to make it work for you. 10 weeks later, I can't get you that supervision back. We can only go into things like exam board remedies, which are arcane and difficult and never have the situation where you can get that time back again. Even if we can do something with your marks, which is very difficult and often impossible, I can't get you that time back to allow you to realise your potential in this key piece of work. And that's what we should be doing. So, if there's a problem, you're going to let me know. Thank you. That is good. And therefore, we'll never get in that situation where really just a handful of people have problems. Okay. So, this point is about time. Just I'll give you a nod towards time management. Some of you will have two other modules this semester. Some will have one other module this semester. But think, if you're not doing it already, think about your working week as if you are a young professional in a job. Some of you will have done jobs over the summer. Some people of you are doing jobs alongside this. This is not alien to you, but adopt it for your dissertation progress. This is key credits in a key credit bearing year. You've got to give your time to it. Work out in any given day. There's morning, afternoon, evening, for example. Which two slots are you going to be working on your dissertation? How are you going to fit in with other things? How are you going to keep yourself sane by making sure you go to the gym, seeing your friends and all that sort of stuff? Make a plan, keep to it, make it bite-sized, chunky, doable. I have this all the time with my stuff. I come out teaching or come out doing administration. Think, I've got to write a paper. Oh, the overwhelming mountain of this paper. How am I going to even start on the foothills? Okay, 45 minutes, John. Do 45 minutes without looking at your phone, without going into the fridge if I'm at home, and then you can have a metaphorical cigarette break. Reward yourself after a little bit of time. And then I'll do another 45 minutes. And before I realise it, by mid-afternoon, if I'm starting in the morning, I'm doing like an hour and a half, I'm doing 2 hours, I'm doing 3 hours at a job. But I couldn't have done 3 hours to begin with. I need to break it down. So this is, work out your week. Give yourself different tasks. Some literature review searches, some working on methodology, some looking back at your empirical material, in order that you're doing something. That at the end of every day, you're thinking, do you know what? I did something today. I can feel proud of myself. I've got momentum to start again tomorrow. That mentality is how this is going to work. So fit this into your other coursework objectives and think about planning your time. That may be in line with how you've always done it, because that's how you've done it before. But this semester it's a little bit if you want to use a tightrope method. It's a long way to fall. But you know, it's just be organised, be mature, be professional. You do all those things, which you kind of should be expecting of yourself anyway, and you will be fine. Okay. Where are we going? Okay. So we're getting towards the end of what I wanted to do today. Let's just So, let's think about perhaps moving away from broader overviews of the dissertation. Let's think about where we're at right now and what sorts of questions you could be asking yourself are somehow that might be useful to moving this whole thing forward. So we're all going to be at different stages, which I've mentioned already is fine. But we need to be really honest and clear with ourselves about where we really are. Let's not hide behind it. Let's look in the mirror and think this is where we're at. Reflect on the data that you've got. Bask in glory if it's worked out really well and you've got everything that you need. For most of you, that might not be the case. But say, okay, that's fine. What do I need to get? How am I going to get it? Can you have a clear idea of that on your own? Can your supervisor help toward that end? Once you're getting that data, reflect back, as we were talking about the questions that you've got, whether they still work, what sort of conceptual themes, empirical theoretical ideas, what works from the modules in year 2 that you've looked at, think, okay, well this is straight down the line of cultural geography, for example, and I want to be using ideas from youth cultures or ethnic cultures or something, so I can use the essays that I've already written on those things, get ideas of place and power or ethnicity or liminality or whatever, and think, okay, well I've got materials here, let's be smart. Let's use all that reading and make it bespoke for my dissertation. Or it could be about economic geography or social geography, whatever it happens to be. Or things that you're thinking, hold on, I've done this fantastic, I'm working on this fantastic dissertation on mobility, for example, but I know that module is coming up in the spring semester. That's just the nature of things. Well, I'll go and chat to the module leader who's running that module and get them to get a few ideas that can help fill in a few gaps about the conceptual things that I want to be doing. And then you can kind of think, okay, the dissertation is like this big landscape out in front of me. What's the topography of literature that I need? Well, I need the hills of ideas of place. I know I need some stuff on power. I need some stuff on age, or if it's regeneration. I know I'm going to need stuff on regeneration policy, perhaps about economic development if I'm focusing on that. And I probably need some national policy or European policy or local policy to make all these things speak to one another, bring all these things into conversation. What are the conversants in this conversation that you need to be thinking about? How, just like in a chat show, you're going to be the talk show host and you are bringing in all these different things to discuss around them. That's the broad things that you could be doing now to really support yourself. Okay. A few slides now on back to that kind of overview about what is a good dissertation. Good dissertations come in all forms. There isn't one model answer. The dissertations that I put on Learning Central have all scored first-class marks, and they're all really quite different in how they look and feel like. So you can look at those and align yourself with some of them, or indeed reinvent something new. But generally, they adopt the structure that we've already outlined, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But what they all have in common too is they're all doable. They were all realisable. They all set up questions that weren't how do we gain world peace, or how do we cure cancer geographically or something. They were relatively small questions. You're probably aware already that you're thinking, crikey, 10,000 words is a lot of writing. How am I going to fill it? I need a really big question. The opposite is true. If you can get what your dissertation is about in a tweet, it's the right size. Because just like a good old-fashioned ordnance survey map, it will grow. It will suddenly become so enormous that is really difficult to control. Okay? Good dissertations are often clear, focused, and doable. Okay? So actually, small is beautiful when we're thinking about research dissertation, because these things always unfold. So being clear and coherent in your questions is key. Because this immediacy of, well, okay, I think it's big enough. Connecting it to geographical theory and policy is a necessary thing you have to do. And by extension, therefore, it grows. You're not the first person to ever ask these broad questions. Other people have done so already. In your literature review, as we'll go on to see, that's what that's about. Saying, I'm standing on the shoulders of all these different people's ideas. And think, well, okay, let's talk 3,000 words. Done just that, and you thought your thing was just that big. And then we talk about methodology. Okay. But the methodology has to be aligned, as we were talking about in relation to the ethics form, to the geographical literature. Are you doing methods that make sense in relation to the questions you're asking and the other literatures that you focus on? So, keep it very small. You're a third of the way through with your words covered without even really trying. The key point in relation to these bullets up here is, how to put it, coherence is one, synergy is another way of talking about it, but there's got to be an alignment between your questions, your theory, your methods, and your empirics. If you're asking these questions, well, your empirical chapters have to answer those questions. The methods need to be the appropriate methods to get the data to enable to answer your questions. We'll talk about it there. The literature review needs to be germane to the things that you're talking about. It's relatively straightforward if you think about it like that. Well, of course, there's got to be constructive alignment between these things. And if you do that, you're well on the way to a really, really strong dissertation. Because actually, a job a lot of people don't make that constructive alignment. Okay? So, at this point in the process, be thinking, okay, can I make my questions clear and coherent? And can I imagine a through line through my dissertation where these questions suggest these literatures, which suggest these methods, which suggest these answers that I'm in the process of creating? That's really what it's all about. And when you do that, you can signpost really well. You can make sure one chapter links to the next chapter, links to the next chapter. You can always sense check relevance. You can go, okay, what's this section doing in my thesis if it's not talking to a question or not talking back to my title? I think, well, it should be talking back to my title, but I'm not. If I just read this, it's not saying that. Well, therefore, I need to make the case. That's what I need to add. That's how I can add value. Connect this section back to the title somehow. It's often a really good thing just to do. And think every paragraph, end of every section, doesn't matter what chapter you're in. Does it somehow add value to the title? Does it somehow speak to the title? If it's not, can I make it speak to the title? If I can't make it speak to the title, it's probably suggesting that it shouldn't be there. It's probably really interesting, but it's probably something else. If you think, well, it's kind of relevant, but I'm kind of going down a bit of a cul-de-sac and I need to come back to the main thing, that's suggesting it should be in an appendix or in a footnote. It shouldn't be in the main body of your work. So, clarity, coherence, relevance, alignment, these are the things that you should be thinking to make your dissertation work. To make sure this conversation between your questions and your methods and your empirical and your lit review happens throughout. Okay, this is just a note to self to make think actually the way in which we can do this is how the introduction fits the lit review. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about that because once I get going I'll just do it anyway. Right, so the introduction, this is kind of a 2-minute overview of what a dissertation is, what it should feel like, and kind of like capture it in a bottle and look again through the months that have come up. The introduction is saying, well, what's the spatial phenomenon I'm looking at? What's the problem out there that you're going to be looking at in this thing? Now, it might not necessarily be the particular case, it's the broad problem. You might have heard about espresso macchiato. Okay, imagine people that you're having an espresso macchiato because you had some prosecco last night, and the prosecco started off like this, and it went down in a narrow thing and had a nice glass bottom at the base. Okay, it's the wine glass, people, with the macchiato thing, and this is your dissertation. This is the introduction page, even the first page of your dissertation. You start broad at the top. What's the big spatial phenomena you're looking at? Climate change is a problem. We're all going to die. Is your opening line. Well, that's caught my attention. I need to read on. But actually, climate change is forced by people, not enough people, pogo sticking to work. They're doing other stuff. Pogo sticking is the solution to climate change, and my dissertation's about that. It's going to look at the way people pogo stick on their way to school in Roath in Cardiff. I've gone from big down the macchiato down to narrow, specific. I've started broad and I've got narrow. Thank you for that visual metaphor. Okay, and it could be about anything, but grab your reader's attention about a key issue that is of import. I'm thinking, well, actually, climate change is too big, but you're actually using a theme, a strand within that theme, and then you're going to have a particular thread within that strand to look at in your dissertation. From big to narrow, almost within a paragraph or so. And what you've done is you've punched the reader between the eyes, and you're thinking, this matters. I didn't know that I was going to be interested in pogo sticks. I mean, who on earth? But you've made it matter, saying pogo sticks is connected to something that we all should be caring about, right? And you need to be thinking about that, because you're thinking about who's going to read your thesis. Now, you should be thinking, as we'll go on later on, to think about the thesis should be read. You should be writing it as if to a lay person. So you're explaining it to your mum and your dad, right? They don't know all the intricacies of the theory and whatnot. Write it as if you're trying to explain to your housemate who's doing biology or something. Think of who you're writing it to. But one of the person who's going to mark your dissertation is not your supervisor. Your dissertation will be marked by 2 people. Your supervisor will be your second marker, and an unknown other member of staff will be your first marker. And they'll both mark it blind, and they'll both give independent marks, and then they will get together and they will decide on the strengths and the weaknesses of your piece of work and come up with an agreed mark. Okay? So you can't assume that even though you're doing climate change and pogo sticks, and Andrew Collins was your supervisor, that the other person is going to know anything about your first marker, is going to know anything about climate change or indeed pogo sticks or carbon footprinting or whatever. So you have to pitch it at a level to say, I'm really passionate about this, but you should really be too. And this is how I'm going to, your introduction is your opportunity to convince them how interesting this subject is, because it relates to a bigger subject or whatever. So your introduction sets up the spatial problem that you're looking at. It focuses it on a particular sub-theme or strand or something within that bigger problem. And it also says, this is the sort of approach I'm taking to it. Because you could be looking at regeneration and taking a Marxist approach or a feminist approach, or informed by your geographical ideas work last year, for example. That's why it was there, to give you that basis for this bit of your undergraduate career. Or say I'm actually going to look on theories of X, Y, or Z and be actually quite bespoke. I'm taking a Deleuzean approach to regeneration. In your introduction, you make that case. And you defend why a Deleuzean approach is interesting. You don't have to tell me everything about the theory yet. Your literature review will do that, but you'll be introducing that stuff. And then you're saying, with that in mind, I'm going to be asking these questions. These three key questions derive from the broad, to the strand, to the approach that you're taking to these questions. You might be putting it on in a case study. So that's when you introduce your case study. I'm going to ask these questions in this place for this reason. And you might even tantalise your reader by saying, and I might be concluding something like this. Kind of just hinting, making them, oh, it's a page turner. This is a Dan Brown dissertation by this stage. Your reader, the person wants to read on, they didn't know they knew anything about pogo sticks, or wanted to know, but by the end they really did. This is why your introduction and your conclusion are often written at the back end of the work, because right now you perhaps don't know what you're going to conclude. As I said before, that might be the beginning, this is what this dissertation is going to do, and this is what this dissertation begins. So your introduction opens up, introduces the problem, and the way you're going to tackle that problem. The literature review says, if these are my questions, if this is the problem, what literatures are relevant for me to engage with to help me answer my questions? Initially you say, it's this bunch of theories, this bunch of theories, and this bunch of theories. Your job is to identify which theories, which order to put them in, how to separate and sequence and link them in your literature review, and write them in a coherent way. Your methodology, if these are my questions, and this is my literature, what are the best methods to help me answer those questions? Are they, for example, qualitative or quantitative? You might even go, what epistemology does this presume? Am I interested in frequencies and facts, and therefore have a realist epistemology ontology, and therefore I need quantitative data? Or am I interested in views and interpretations and feelings about people, about this phenomenon? Therefore I might be agnostic about my epistemology, not that excessive, but I want qualitative data. And effectively then, you're going through almost a flowchart of, well, which qualitative data? If I could use X, Y, and Z, why am I choosing X and Y and not Z? How did I implement them in this particular case? What ethical issues did I come across? What problems did I come across? What lessons can I learn from methodology? Your methodology is in fact a kind of methodological review. If that's a literature review about theories, this is just a review about methods and explaining which ones you used and why. And these then can flow through into the empirical chapters to answer each one of your questions. We okay? We good? So, signposting, consistency, clarity, setting it up so you can do it within 10,000 words. There's a range of dissertations on Learning Central for you to look at. And at some point in the next couple of weeks, I would recommend you do so. Okay, just to get a look and feel so you understand what a good, in inverted commas, dissertation is. Some of your ideas, as I've mentioned, if you need to focus in your critical mind to think, okay, is this relevant or is this not? I'm certain it is, but I'm not making the case. How can I make the case? I genuinely remember sitting, it must have gone home for Christmas in my final year of my own undergraduate dissertation, and I was writing it out, typing it out, whatever. My mum brought me a cup of coffee, and in the same way that you do, you regress to being a sulky teenager. Mum, what are you doing? Well, just leave me alone. I'm on work. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing this already. And she was a school teacher, which was kind of annoying all the time. And she was looking over my shoulder. I'm going, snash and thrash and dick-dastardly, just go away. And she said, this doesn't make any sense. And of course, that was even more annoying. And I said, it does make sense, Mum. It means this. And I went, blah, 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 and told her exactly what it means. She said, that's not what you've read. That's not what you've written. You've written, I think, oh, bugger, she's right. How annoying is that even more? Sometimes when you say things out loud, you get the clarity you don't get when you write things down. You've got to make everything relevant. You've got to make the case. You've got to make every paragraph earn its right to be in your thesis. If you can't, it's got to go. And yeah, to summarise almost where we begin, there's 100 or so people in this room. You're all going to have different problems, different solutions. You'll be at different stages of the process. If you're the sort of person that always liked to compare yourself to other people in the room when you were doing your own 2,000-word essays, and oh my God, it's 2 weeks to the deadline. Have you started yet? Have you done this? This is a different type of work. In my experience, comparing yourself to someone else kind of generates anxiety. So try not to do that. Only do that if you think, right, I've always worked with this person and I've used them to spur me on to make myself better. If it's going to be like that, then do it. Otherwise, just think, this is unique. It's me and my supervisor. And these moments, this semester, they're the things that I'll use to spur me on, rather than worrying about whether I'm the same as someone else. Okay, we've talked about that. I think about being repetitive. Okay, so finally then. See your supervisor. Do stuff every week. Plan your time. Get yourself up to speed in the first couple of weeks. So by the time like week 3 comes around, everything is just fueling itself. You are an engine getting this stuff done. Nail the stuff that you need to get done in the first 5 weeks, otherwise you will be in pain in the second 5 weeks. Don't put yourself under that pressure. Work out a plan with your supervisor and you keep to it and get them to keep to it. And if there's a problem, speak to me. Okay. That's all I wanted to say this morning. Before you just all disappear and go and get your 11s. Any questions? Thoughts, comments, concerns? If you have some that you don't want to say because we've just been here too long now and you just want to get out, email me. I'll deal with them personally and I'll deal with them collectively next week. We'll have a literature review and methodology thing next week before you have your Friday mornings back to yourself again. But also think about what you want to do in those downtime weeks for this module and how you like to use them, and we'll confirm what we'll do next